Greetings, dear viewers and listeners. Previously, we spoke of the outposts of the Lathe worlds, which became the heart of the Techmagos of Calixis. Today, however, the focus will be on the secret organizations and clandestine societies that lurk within the system or have ventured far beyond its bounds to conceal their techno-sorcery from prying eyes. On ancient maps, blank spaces were once drawn, inscribed with the ominous "Here be dragons," a reminder to mariners of the dangers lurking in unknown and treacherous waters. Well, my young pupil, now observe the blank spot on the display of your auspex and know this: here indeed live dragons. Senior Adept Pilot Tabula Rasa, Lord's Dragon. It is with them that we begin today's tale. In the labyrinth of asteroids amidst gravitational tides and random singularities sprawls the mysterious abyss. This area of stable gravity does not appear on maps and star atlases. There are no records of it, and no data shard contains hints of its existence. Its exact location is known only to a select few adepts of the Mechanicus Calixis. However, we have heard whispers of a secret space station located somewhere within the system of lathes. It is described as a grim citadel under whose vaults are housed the very mightiest creations from the Mechanicus legends. Many have even heard its name, inadvertently slipping from the tongue of one addled by the scrap code of the forbidden binary structure. And that name is Panopticon. In the early years of the 38th millennium, a mysterious ship entered the space of the Pondus system, its steel and red glimmers mutedly reflecting in the rays of the fierce white-blue Centeneme. Decorated with skulls and cogwheels, the vessel immediately engaged in intensive reconnaissance of the region. The beams of powerful auspexes began probing the surrounding space, meticulously surveying, measuring and cataloguing it. Almost immediately, a host of intriguing anomalies was discovered. Unexplained gravitational tides shook the system. The heart of the system, its star, emitted wave cadences that baffled even the most gifted celestial adepts or decryption cogitators. Scanning the twisted, interwoven asteroid belts also yielded truly extraordinary results. It soon became apparent that the system presented a rare and highly interesting object, dominion over which would greatly benefit the Adeptus Mechanicus should the Calixis expanse fall under the rule of the Pax Imperialis. However, it was equally clear that this ship alone could not conduct a full and comprehensive investigation, so all operations were suspended, and the explorator vessel, having traversed the system, vanished into the warp on the opposite side. Almost a century later, several lighter vessels, very similar in design and coloration to the first, arrived. Moving stealthily and purposefully, the ships dispersed throughout the system. All space had been duly scanned and mapped, with exhaustive dossiers compiled on every planet, anomaly, and peculiar cosmological feature. On 3 planets within the system, forgotten human colonies were discovered, having been without the light of the Emperor for many millennia. It was decided that if the cult Mechanicus were destined to seize the system, the inhabitants of these colonies would become the ideal workforce. At the very moment when on Mars and Terra, the meticulous and cautious process of advancing towards this goal only began, a specialized explorator fleet departed from the planets of the Pondus system and set out to embrace the dangers of its madly looped asteroid belts. The fleet suffered significant losses during the expedition, with many adepts and sailors perishing. But the prolonged and thorough preparation did not go unrewarded. Deep within the deadly, chaotic cloud of grinding celestial rocks, an ancient artifact was activated, creating a bubble of stable gravity around itself and a safe haven within the tempestuous sea of stone. Soon within this safe zone, construction began, and the future space bastion quickly began to take shape. While the bastion was being constructed, a fleet of light craft dispersed throughout the system, carrying thousands upon thousands of Auspex clusters, picked capture scanners, and all-seeing arrays, which were soon placed on all planets and the largest planetoids of all 3 asteroid belts. Before long, the entire system was under surveillance, and every action, every word, and every Vox transmission could henceforth be detected, analyzed, and recorded. The deployment of the precursor network and the construction of the Obsidian Fortress were completed almost simultaneously, making the cult Mechanicus the rulers of the system long before its inhabitants and the authorities of the Imperium even became aware of it. For several years, explorator fleets expanded the boundaries of explored space, using the station as a secret relay point. During the Anjou Crusade, it served as a command hub for the scouts of the Mechanicus moving in the vanguard. The veil of secrecy over the station remained undisturbed, even after the system officially came under the control of the Mechanicus. Its existence was still known only to the highest-ranking Archmagos. The Fabricator General himself entrusted its governance to the Lord's Dragon, who took upon themselves in the name of the Omnissiah the burden of shepherding the newborn Mechanicus Calixis, the ever-watchful eye keenly scanning its flock for the blight of techno-heresy. For 1,000 years, the station has served several purposes. It is, first and foremost, the secret headquarters of the Lord's Dragon, secondly, a laboratory for the development and testing of top-secret weaponry, and thirdly, a repository for weapons and artifacts considered so dangerous that the leaders of the cult Mechanicus are forced to deny their very existence. The iron bones, cast from ore mined on sacred Mars, and the walls constructed from polished obsidian of the Etium Yode Belt, make the Panopticon station the most impregnable fortress of the Stankov system. Colossal guardians of the Harbinger class sit frozen upon every suitable ledge, akin to gargoyles adorning the walls of ancient temples. Their Auspex optics and audiometric revisers vigilantly scour the surrounding void in search of danger. The station serves as the central core of the precursor network, now encompassing all Forge worlds and even certain dominions beyond the Mechanicus's grasp. Vast data tombs and processor blocks occupy a significant portion of the station, their emanating heat the sole disturbance in the stagnant air of these immense chambers. The machine spirits tirelessly sift through faces, speeches, and deeds, seeking the slightest trace of heretical taint. This system of data stacks is so advanced that it requires constant monitoring, for some of its elements stand literally on the brink of the heresy of abominable intelligence. The Lord's Dragon, as the organization of the Calixis Mechanicus with the most fearsome reputation, have utilized the precursor network for centuries to clandestinely monitor every aspect of life on the Forge worlds, attentively listening to its polyphonic hum, in attempts to extract from it the alluring song of techno-heresy that has led so many adepts astray from the true path. Additionally, it allows them to keep their own secrets and quite effectively maintains the illusion of their omniscience. In shadowy halls lined with sacred iron, the Lord's Dragon fulfill their holy duty, conducting regular vigils over several priceless artifacts from the dawn of Mars. Enormous altars in the form of gears emit a mysterious glow in whose flickering the Cog Mechanicus peers enigmatically from each wall. Most of the Lord's Dragon adepts, residing under these dimly lit vaults, are introverted and focused on their own tasks. Their habit of secrecy, too ingrained to abandon, even within the walls of the Panopticon, their most sacred and secure sanctuary. One of the most vital parts of the Panopticon security system consists of the countless myths enshrouding the space around this aerial fortress. From the time the Mechanicus officially became the rulers of the system, tales have been told about a dead zone in space where ships vanish suddenly and without a trace. Among sailors, endless tales circulated about vessels navigating through the tumultuous seas of cosmic rocks, emerging on the other side bereft of a single soul on board and with the memory of their cogitators wiped clean. Most such tales, however, bear truth. A ship coming too near the Panopticon leaves the Lord's Dragon no choice. The ship is either destroyed or boarded. The data stacks of captured vessels are thoroughly purged of any information that could arouse suspicion, while captured sailors and officers are transferred to the station, where they will meet their fate. Some shall be permitted to live as eternal captives of the Panopticon and loyal servants of the Lord's Dragon. For the majority, however, miracles should not be anticipated. At best, they shall be converted into labor servitors. At worst, they will undergo the procedure of irreversible cessation of biological functions with subsequent processing of organic remains. Over time, the influence of the Calixis tech priesthood increased, and the Lord's Dragon realized the necessity of attracting other structures of the Adeptus Mechanicus under their wing, for some events were of such magnitude that their forces simply were insufficient. Nowadays, in the halls of the Panopticon dwell mighty myrmidons, siege batteries of the Ordo Reductor, and in the dark corridors tread silently the mech assassins. Initially crude outlines of the station have undergone transformations through the combined efforts of the Secutor's dragons and the siege masters of the Ordo Reductor. As a result of their endeavours, the complex became encrusted with autonomous research platforms, testing grounds and residential sectors for the increasing number of adepts and officials. Giant blast-proof doors concealed behind them Ordinatus-class weaponry, and collapsible scaffolds of mooring grips prepared to receive arriving ships. The inner corridors turned into multi-kilometric labyrinths through which drift clouds of sacred incense. What once was an observation post of the Lord's Dragon turned into a base for half a dozen different organizations, each keeping its secrets even from each other. The Magos of the Lord's Dragon themselves are concentrated on their own tasks, with the habit of maintaining secrecy deeply ingrained within their consciousness. They do not deviate from it even within the walls of their most sacred and impregnable abode. When it comes to justice and the enforcement of the universal laws among the Adeptus Mechanicus, many names arise that can instill terror in hearts. Thus, for instance, the lower classes of Latherhad whisper about the Lord's Dragon, naming them the Collegiate Extremis. Nothing and no one escapes the judgment of the Lord's Dragon. The universal laws are absolute, therefore so are we absolute. Magos Draco Corsiva. When it comes to the judgment and enforcement of the universal laws across the Adeptus Mechanicus, there are many names that conjure dread. Within the Calixis sector, one of the most secret and most influential of these names is the Lord's Dragon. On Latherhad, menials whisper that the Lord's Dragon are also known as the Collegiate Extremis. On Sheol 17, the prisoners who still retain their sanity refer to them as the Scaled Ones, the correctors of the balance. In the frozen corridors of Alter Templum Calixis Est 17, they are dismissed only as myth. In truth, the Lord's Dragon exists in the Lathe system. They sit in judgment from the orbiting Panopticon station, ever vigilant to uphold the sanctity of the universal laws. Tasked with policing the Calixian Mechanicus and sworn to preserve the tech priesthood from corruption and tech heresy, the Lord's Dragon are shadowy figures who are far more rumour than fact. What is known with certainty is that this group of Archmagos is entrusted with vast authority and resources to carry out their judicial task. Numerous agents exist amongst the Calixian Mechanicus who report to the Lord's Dragon and serve their will. But the Lord's Dragon possess more fearsome tools: the Logicutioners, the Magos Juris, Aquitor Mechassassin, and the Dragon Secutorii. The Magos Juris are those rare tech priests who choose to devote their minds to the study of the machine god's will rather than the knowledge it embodies, removing themselves from the quest for knowledge in order to preserve it from the abuses of the heathen masses of mankind. Amongst their colleagues on the Calixis sector's Forge worlds, these individuals are sometimes known as Magos Juris. They relentlessly pursue those who would commit tech heresy or steal the secrets of the Adeptus Mechanicus. These Magos hunt down any who would employ unsanctioned technology, or even worse, operate technology without the blessing and oversight of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Magos Juris will go so far as to even take Mechanicus void ships into the depths of the Coronus expanse to hunt down their foes. Worse still are those who smuggle technology, attempting to keep it from its rightful guardians. The fate of such men when they are caught is a grim one, for they are condemned to spend a far-expanded lifetime toiling without mind or will as a servitor aboard the starship of the Magos that judge them, their minds obliterated and their bodies repurposed to serve the machine god that they blasphemed against. There are many explorator tech priests who speculate that the Magos Juris are, in fact, the agents of a secret order within the Adeptus Mechanicus known as the Lord's Dragon. This ancient and powerful cabal is composed of specially altered Archmagos, said to exist deep within the secret inner circles of Mechanicus politics on the Calixian Forge worlds known as the Lathes. Their task: to police the Mechanicus from within. However, little evidence can be found that proves the Lord's Dragon exists at all, and that these Magos Juris do not simply operate on their own. Logicutioners. to enforce the edicts of the Lord's Dragon, masked and hooded logicutioners, swathed in robes of deepest black, descend from the panopticon, bearing devices of ancient and Baroque manufacture. The precursator grid and the agents of the Lord's Dragon provide the logicutioners with peerless evidence and information. There are no recorded instances of any suspect escaping a logicutioner unleashed upon his trail. The logicutioners are the implacable hands of the Lord's Dragon, and are said to possess master code ciphers second only to the prime logis key. Dragon Secutorii. It is by pure chance that information about this division reached us. On the final day of the year 815 of the 41st millennium, an encoded data fragment contained within a crystalline stasis shell was delivered to Inquisitor Lord Caedin at the Tricorn Palace on Scintilla. The Inquisition labelled it the Euhedral Datalith, and the data fragment's advanced cipher decay required several high-function cogitators to fully decrypt the partial message within. Purported to be an urgent communication from an unknown tech priest on Lathehesh, the data fragment described an encounter aboard the Panopticon with a nightmarish force named the Dragon Secutorii. The Dragon Secutorii are a force of exactly 300 Mechanicus Secutors, all specially selected veteran warriors, sworn to the Lord's Dragon upon the Annihilatrix altar in the Panopticon. These warriors are not elite soldiers. Instead, they are the ultimate sanction of the Lord's Dragon, deployed only as a measure of undeniable last resort. Furthermore, the Euhedral Datalith claims that the Dragon Secutorii have been involved in a handful of decisive military actions in the Calixis sector, notably during the final assault in the War of Brass, as the centre of a deep strike assassination of a Marathis clan leader in the Meritech Wars, and as part of a boarding party sent on a secret mission against the renegade fleet of the Maligrisian Tech heresy. Only a small amount of technical data was recovered from the Euhedral Datalith, but there are hints that the Dragon Secutorii go into battle encased in massive suits of specially augmented armour and bear ancient weapons from the deepest lathed vaults. All inquiries from the Inquisition have been rebuffed, and Lord Caedin considers the file scant evidence for a formal investigation. Auxilia Myrmidon, one of the main power groups of the Adeptus Mechanicus Calixis, the interests of which are focused on the defense of Magos strongholds, siegecraft and constant training with weapon systems and instruments of war. The Myrmidon Auxilia enjoys the patronage of most of the Lathe worlds, and thus wields considerable weight and influence. Of late, the Secutors of the Myrmidon Auxilia have been massing their forces and are clearly preparing for war. It is said that the assembled force will be part of the reinforcements for the Calixis sector. Regardless, the Supreme Fabricator is well aware that the Myrmidons have massed in unprecedented numbers on Heterodyne Station, and the amount of dataliths being distributed across all possible communication channels most clearly points to preparations for a large-scale tactical operation. Mech assassins. We still have no explanation for the death of the passenger. The only witness claims the void lock unexpectedly opened just as that poor soul walked nearby, while the outer lock was also open. For both to be open is impossible when the Auspex registers open void against the hull, yet it happened. I doubt we will ever know why he was so desperate to leave that system, though I am relieved he did pay in advance. Captain Artesia Carnaline of the Killian's Prize. Killers come in all shapes and sizes. Some are quiet and graceful, others are bold, some are clothed in flesh, others in fabric, others in steel. In the Calixis sector there exists an innumerable multitude of orders devoted to the art of death, and one among them is the Acuitor set of the Foundries, less formally known as Mech Assassins. These executioners answer only to the Magisters of Samadhi of their order, and typically carry out the will of their masters, without question cloaked beneath dark red robes. Although most are trained in the art of stealth, the devotees of the Acuitor set often act openly. After all, the priesthood of Mars is inscrutable to all outsiders, save for the most informed and even the most influential citizens of the Calixis sector regard these strange mechanical half-humans with reverence and fear. It is quite unusual for the average person to question the actions of even the most humble novice of the Adeptus Mechanicus. No matter how odd or mysterious their behavior may be, which is why many see the Acuitors, but few pay them any mind. For all except the High Lords of the Cult Mechanicus and certain Inquisitors who maintain close ties to the Adeptus Mechanicus or have sworn enemies therein, nothing distinguishes a Mechassassin Acuitor from the teeming, augmented crowd of robe-clad tech priests performing countless labors that allow the sector to survive another day. Nothing distinguishes them, at least, until it becomes too late. To a considerable extent, this very unobtrusiveness is what makes the Acuitor set so deadly. Although the truth of the origin of the Acuitor set is scattered across the worlds of the Foundries like data fragments damaged by ferromagnetic cleansing, some hazy records can still be found. In the time of the Angevin Crusade, a pious magos named Samadhi led his small forces to several key victories in the great campaign of the Mechanicus against the Adranti in the region of space that would later become the Calixis sector. After the bequest of the Foundries in the year 380 of the 39th millennium, when the worlds of the Foundries were granted to the Cult Mechanicus for their aid in the Crusade, Samadhi used his newly acquired influence to form a secret organization. Some stories claim that he did so with the silent consent of the then influential Lord's Dragon, promising future services. He trained and mentored the members of his cult in the art of eliminating the enemies of the Omnissiah. Samadhi constructed hidden fortresses scattered across the worlds of the Foundries, such as Razamal on Lethahesh and Tumala at the heart of the sacred Panopticon. In these fortresses, his disciples were transformed into the perfect weapons of the Omnissiah and terrifying instruments of death. Rumors say that one day Samadhi vanished into the depths of the archives of Tumala, perhaps finally freeing himself completely from the weaknesses of the flesh, or becoming one with the ancient cogitators housed within the fortress. Whatever the circumstances, Samadhi's disciples rallied around the treatises left behind by the first Grand Magister of the Acuitor set. His adherents believe that these treatises, grounded upon the outcome of his own calculations, contain his final scheme, in which all his disciples are involved, yet none can fathom. By inscribing the preserved knowledge directly into their own minds, the agents of the Acuitor set have always followed in their founder's footsteps, relentlessly hunting down any they deemed an obstacle to the Adeptus Mechanicus. From the very first followers of the founder of the Acuitor set, all who attained the title of Master upon taking office adopted the honorific name Magister Samadhi, and over time the name of Samadhi became synonymous with death itself. At present, the Acuitor set has expanded surreptitiously, and although its members are still rather few, there are several worlds where they recruit those most inclined to tread the dark paths of the Omnissiah. Most neophytes are already seasoned techno-priests who have employed their unique skills to kill foes, having found themselves on the battlefield due to unfortunate circumstances or situations where confrontation was the most logical outcome. Upon passing rigorous trials, neophytes are furnished with data from the records of the long-lost founder. Although the novices remain human, each bears within them a fragment of the vast calculating mind that makes the Acuitor set what it is. Armed with the knowledge contained within the ancient data, all Acuitor mech-assassins can operate according to one overarching plan, never meeting other agents after their training is complete, and even without comprehending the true intention of the plan. The labor of many becomes unified, casting the shadow of Magister Samadhi's grim silhouette over the Calixis sector many centuries after his disappearance. Thus, these masked agents roam the sector, servicing starships, restoring cogitators, repairing jammed weapons, and occasionally slaying unsuspecting individuals. The methods of assassination employed by mech-assassins vary. Some prefer clean kills from afar, while others aim to kill by ingeniously crafted traps or meticulously programmed equipment malfunctions. There are also those who delight in feeling the wet metal of victims flowing in dark crimson streams down the blades of their mechadendrites. Many Acuitors are trained to enter a state of terrible mania on command, flooding their minds with data from the Samadhi treatise, allowing this data to guide them in the thick of battle. This practice renders them fearless, for they know that everything transpires according to the plan of the Great Magister. These opposites, extreme razor-sharp calculation and wild battle fury, must be balanced to make a trained Aquitor mech-assassin one of the deadliest individuals raised by the stanchions. However, in any case, the sharpest weapon an Aquitor possesses is his mind. If Aquitor has the opportunity, he meticulously plans a murder, modelling it over and over in his augmented skull and considering a vast array of factors that few could account for without the gifts of the Omnissiah. He can relentlessly pursue his target for many months or years, gathering as much information as possible that can be used in his grim endeavour. The sharp, clear mind of the mecha assassin Aquitor allows him to use almost anything as a lethal weapon. Steam pipes become a steam trap for the unwary passerby, firearms turn into a timed bomb for their own owner, and an ancient cogitator becomes a dark labyrinth from which the mind of a helplessly sitting notorious heretic cannot escape. Even if Aquitor cannot kill using the environment, he can depressurize a spacecraft cabin or release reactor gas into a nearby air duct to put the enemy in a vulnerable position. The Aquitor set member has unlimited murder possibilities at their disposal, and choosing the best one for the enemies of the Omnissiah is merely their role in the great quest for knowledge. Tech priests chosen to be transformed into Aquitors are gathered from all corners of the forges and beyond, and trained in secret fortresses scattered across the Calixis sector, such as Tumala and Razamal. The majority of candidates are those who are both devoted and capable of using the abilities of the Adeptus Mechanicus for assassination. Becoming an Aquitor means becoming part of an essence much greater than oneself, as all members of the Circle carry within their minds data from the treatise of Magister Samadhi, which guides their fury towards the target and helps quickly eliminate those who stand against the forges. Those able to withstand the weight of the data from the treatise and even begin to decipher the ancient, unfathomable records become assassins of the greatest efficiency and brutality. Agents Lord's Dragon. Even before ships of the Lathe class arrived in the Pondus system, now called the Lathe World system, explorators discovered surviving descendants of the first colonists who managed to thrive amidst the aggressive conditions of their native worlds. To gain an advantage from this, the Magos made several modifications to their genome. To exclude all undesirable claims, especially from the ecclesiarchy, the entire population was placed aboard several massive vessels, put into stasis, and taken to the periphery of the system's comet cloud. When many years later a crusade arrived in the system, their gaze met barren and harsh worlds, suitable only for the Adeptus Mechanicus. Once officially gaining control over the worlds, the Lord's Dragon simply returned the people home, people who were quite capable and sincerely willing to work for the benefit of the Omnissiah. It was the Lord's Dragon who ensured that the system, later to be known as Lathe Worlds, was discovered by explorator fleets and subsequently came under the dominion of the Adeptus Mechanicus. New forge furnaces were ignited, the dragons stood in the shadows alongside the masters of the forges, new ships were launched into the void, and the dragons were already among the crew. New Skitarii regiments were formed, and the dragons became aware of every blasphemous thought. There was not a moment when the Lord's Dragon couldn't know what was happening in the Mechanicus domains of the newborn sector. Such power makes the Inquisition nervous to this day, for the servants of the Holy Ordos believe that only they possess such authority and power. The mere thought of the existence of an organization not under their control doing the same evokes repulsion in them. Structures subordinate to Terra in Calixis have for years made fruitless attempts to gain access to the Lathe World's Panopticon orbital station, but all their requests have invariably been denied. Worse still, the Inquisition has no way to prove that the Lord's Dragon exists at all, which in itself seems incredible. An even greater concern for the Inquisition are new reports on the expansion of the precursor network beyond the Mechanicus cult. This implies that the Lord's Dragon might have access to information on the affairs of the ecclesiarchy, Lord of the sector Marius Hax, and even to the Tricorn, the main palace of the Inquisition in the Calixis sector. Some even believe that all cybernetics produced in the sector is part of this network, meaning that every augmentic bearer is an unwitting spy in the service of the dragons. If a revelation of such magnitude proves true, the reaction will be so strong that the sector will inevitably plunge into the depths of civil war. The Inquisition has initiated operations more than once or twice to infiltrate agents into the ranks of the dragons, but all ended unsuccessfully. Agents returned either empty-handed or did not return at all. Despite the secret nature of their work and their penchant for sophisticated political maneuvers, the Lord's Dragons surprisingly readily engage with the Inquisition when the matter requires it. Unlike all other Mechanicus in Calixis, they do not shy away from cooperating with other organizations, as long as their own role remains behind the scenes. All this ensures them a truly intimidating reputation, causing the servants of the Mechanicus to devoutly believe that a vigilant eye always watches over everyone, that the agents of the Panopticon operate in plain sight, remaining unrecognizable, and that the legendary Dragon Secretarii are always on guard and ready at a moment's notice to crush anyone who is damned in the eyes of the machine. Such rumors are the best means to cover possible shortcomings in the surveillance system or limitations in authority. Some even say that the precursor networks do not exist at all, and only the threat of their existence keeps the Lathe Worlds in proper subservience to the will of the Omnissiah. Few, however, are willing to test the veracity of such fabrications through personal experience, so the truth is known only to the inhabitants of the Panopticon. To be an agent dragon means to perform great deeds in the name of the Omnissiah. But each infiltrator, despite their powerful theoretical foundations, may in practice have their unique understanding of what can be considered techno-heresy. However, this nuance does not prevent them from increasing the survival chances of the cult Mechanicus in Calixis. Everyone who serves the dragons is keenly aware that humanity stands a short step away from a new plunge into darkness, and that step can be a singular blasphemous experiment or the activation of one xenodevice. Their duty is to prevent this step, regardless of the opinions and desires of the rest of the sector. Much like the Inquisition, the Lord's Dragon are very cautious when it comes to selecting personnel. Every carefully chosen agent must be faithful, spiritually resilient, and ready to take their secrets to the grave. To join the dragons means to become part of the great web of secrets of Calixis, a network of the precursor. And although not all agents have seen the Panopticon at all, each of them is aware of its mystical ability to gather and process data from each of the forge worlds of the sector. The dragon agents work together with the Inquisition on a regular basis, but this does not prevent many members of the Holy Orders from seeing this cooperation as just another example of how the Lord's Dragon are gradually infiltrating every aspect of their operations. Sistrons, on the stanks, deeply under the gloomy workshops and manufactorums, laboratories are hidden, full of ancient and decrepit cogitators, whose purpose is to create shadow functionaries. Candidates brought here undergo a series of technotic engram brandings and implantation procedures, transforming a follower of the machine god into a sleeper agent of the Lord's Dragon, a Sistrons. This process is extremely labor-intensive, and the chances of success are small. Most often, the candidate proves mentally incapable of enduring the transformation of their inherent skills and abilities into something completely different. Those who manage to succeed may still fail to endure the psychic reprocessing of personality and memory, losing in the process the connection between body and soul, ultimately becoming no more than another source of flesh for servitors. Those who have managed to survive become the vessel for a new self. After this, the Sistrons takes in a new personality, a set of false memories, as well as the skills and talents necessary to become yet another faceless inhabitant of the sector. He quickly becomes a cog in the mechanism of the world he has been assigned to inhabit. Although the basal personality of a Sistron remains in the deepest lethargic slumber, it subconsciously exhibits an urge to labor, instilling in those around it a sense of well-being and contentment, thus creating the impression of a reliable and valuable member of society. all of which significantly facilitates the process of gathering intelligence data. Once the creators of the Sistron deem it physiologically and psychologically ready, it is placed in stasis. Then the agent is secretly transported to the location where its mission will take place. Rumors speak of worlds not only within the Calixis sector, but also the lawless Coronis expanse, and integrated into the local community. The Sistron is provided with all necessary documentation, work permits, and a false paper trail. More than enough for full integration. Once settled, the Sistron seeks to assume a position necessary for the completion of the task programmed into its subconscious. This process can take days, weeks, or even years. The agent itself is unaware of the true purpose of its actions. Furthermore, they may change over time in accordance with circumstances. For this, a Watcher, a specialized agent assigned to monitor Sistrons deployed in the region, makes the necessary adjustments to the subconscious program of the Sistron using a particular enhancing Argo. If the knowledge is significant enough, the patience of the Mechanicus in its acquisition can be truly boundless. Many agents expend a considerable portion of their lives in meticulous and gradual pursuit of the goal. Once the Sistron completes its task, it goes to meet its Watcher, guided by the deepest layers of its engram claims. Occasionally, a Sistron's program does not fully set in, or certain fragments are erased over time, or its Watcher may perish before activating the agent's protocols. Often, Sistrons are simply forgotten, the very fact of their existence lost in the course of random data purges or info stack failures, and their lives proceed without activation until some confluence of circumstances accidentally triggers its core personality. Or it may spend its remaining life wandering across the sector, bearing the knowledge it was intended to acquire, and never knowing why its wanderlust became so intense. Sistrons are secret agents of the Mechanicum, rumored to be spread throughout the sector. These agents of the Dragon Lords exist for a multitude of reasons. Some gather information on various factions of the Imperium, unwilling to deal with the Mechanicum. Others are part of a complex plan to overcome particularly stubborn obstacles in the quest for knowledge, and in the name of the Omnissiah, for the greater glory of the Forge Worlds. Some Sistrons are observers stationed in key sector locations, awaiting events that will trigger the activation protocol and reveal those who dare threaten the blessed triad of worlds. Though the murky world of espionage and intrigue is dangerous in its own right, the soul of a Sistrons harbours far more terrifying things. Indeed, technotic encoding and engrammatic implantation are quite reliable. But there are cases when one of these highly trained and gifted individuals discovers that their true self begins to wrestle with the false memory for control over their mind. Sistrons wardens are trained to notice signs of unscheduled awakening in time and either direct agents for retraining or dispose of them permanently. Sometimes, however, a warden fails to notice these signs, or a Sistrons loses contact with them, leaving the awakened agent alone with themselves, knowing nothing of their past or what to do next. Once awakening occurs, a Sistrons begins, so to speak, to wage a war on two fronts. First, the Sistrons' very personality begins to literally fall apart, and only time will tell which self will become dominant. The second issue of the free Sistrons is that many agents become such against their will. Now they are a well-trained operative who, whether they believe or disbelieve in the path laid out by their indoctrination, may desire to either complete their mission or take revenge on their employers. Discordant. They, in their audacity, silence the holy machine spirit. With their touch, they quiet the chattering of the cogitator. With a thought, they can eliminate the hallowed cacophony of the manufactorums. They are an anathema to the Omnissiah, and they cannot be allowed to exist. Archligos breathed, while in an audience with Archmagos Mat Aleph Xenon. There are tales told in the dark and shadowy hovels that are home to the menial workers of the lathe worlds of the Calixis sector. There, in the smoke and haze, while drinking bottles of locally made spirits, one can hear rumours and stories of a kind told nowhere else. One such story tells of those who have become more than human, those who can reach out and, with a thought, access and disrupt the most holy machines of the Omnissiah. Those who work the forges hold these beings in equal parts horror and awe. Some who toil in the lathes might see them as liberators from the crushing labour and despair of their forge emplacement, while others might cringe at the chaos and disruption such monstrosities might bring to the order and structure of the workers' lives. These beings, which the lathe sect of the cult Mechanicus formerly labelled discordants, are still more rumour than reality. Such data that exists on them indicate that they are extremely rare, possibly 1 in a trillion people within the Calixis sector. Once born, many discordants never realize their frightening potential, as their ability stays quiescent until stress or high emotion triggers it in a moment of need. Once active, they soon realize there are many who would hunt them down relentlessly, either to exploit or destroy. Discordants are truly rare individuals who can suppress a machine's spirit and effectively force a machine to turn off, halt its function, or possibly even explode. Just by being near more advanced forms of machinery, the discordant can cause them to freeze, break down, or even alter their function for short periods of time. Those who possess such ability are usually cut off from most societies that require these machines to continue their existence. Some may even be seen by more superstitious factions to harbour some kind of curse that brings ruination and trouble to everyone and everything they work with. Those who do not find an accidental death are sure to find their unusual talents more called upon by those of a criminal or heretical mindset than those who labour to bring the plans of the Adeptus Mechanicus's watchdogs, the Lord's Dragon, to fruition. With such an unsettling ability, it is little wonder that at times the entirety of the Lathes Mechanicus hierarchy are bent on finding, controlling or destroying discordants, often all 3. Various factions of the Adeptus Mechanicus may try to harness such gifts to use against their political or social enemies. Certainly, members of the Inquisition would love to bring such a force against not only the Mechanicus, but also those who hide from the Emperor's light. All in all, the life of a discordant is one of constant fear and hiding. Discordants are anathema to almost everything in the Calixis sector. Their ability to quiet a machine's spirit is horrifying, not only to the Mechanicus, but also to those who rely on those very technologies. Those who are not trying to destroy the discordant will instead want to capture them and find out how they can do such a thing. As one might expect, discordants are not popular with individuals who possess bionics and can never themselves possess any kind of cybernetic augmentation. A discordant cannot be tracked, targeted, or in any way viewed by any kind of machinery. This means that Auspex, auger arrays, and imaging cogitators of all kinds do not see the discordant, and instead merely show empty space where the discordant is, or the cogitator screen becomes covered in interference. Weapon targeters cannot focus on the discordant. Individuals using cybernetic senses such as sight or hearing do not register the discordant. Medicae cogitators cannot diagnose or treat a discordant, and the individual must rely on others with medical knowledge to treat any wounds. This does not mean that a discordant cannot be shot, but it does mean that the shooter cannot use a targeter or other machine-augmented sight to try and accurately hit the discordant. All discordants can mentally reach out and quiet a machine spirit located within a piece of technology, effectively shutting it down for a certain length of time. To do this, a discordant must be within touching distance of the machinery they want to affect. At this point, it is worth saying that the information about the Lord's Dragon and secret instruments has come to an end, and it is time to move on to other secret societies that inhabit the Calixis sector. And let's start with the college cult Graviticus. High fabricator Davos Farr established this sect within the Lather worlds in an attempt to recreate some of the wondrous technologies found on Mars. The college cult Graviticus operate and maintain gravplate technology, ranging from the relatively small plates found in space marine land speeders up to the massive decks of the Imperial Navy and the even larger suspensor forges of Lathe Hard. The unique gravitational properties of the lathe system provides a particular importance for the college cult Graviticus, and it is from their ranks that many suspensor magos have been raised since the Calixis sector's founding. It is common for the college cult Graviticus of the Lathe worlds to work with explorator fleets, as many devices and conveyances suitable for surveying worlds contain gravplate technology, such as the rare and agile lathe pattern speeders. Many of the rediscoveries of the explorator fleets have assisted the college cult Graviticus in making gravplates more widely available, and the lathe worlds are one of the premier locations for the manufacture and refurbishment of this rare technology. Magos Etheric. Given the nature of the lathes, it is little surprise that the Mechanicum of Calixis has developed several unique sects devoted to the study of gravity and its effects upon the materium, all falling under the college cult Graviticus. The Magos Etheric are one such faction, aiming their research more towards how such forces interact with the delicate membrane that exists between the immaterium and real space. The hazardous nature of their work usually demands their bodies be toughened with rippling layers of vat-grown lattice tissue so that they can withstand nearby gravimantic fluctuations without being torn apart. And years of experience allow them to maintain their stance while being pulled into the intense fields. Their experiments usually involve controlled collapsed matter implosions to learn what, if any, warp fluctuations then occur. While most Magos Etheric rely on passive augury arrays to gather their data, some of the more reckless on Diogenes 4 dare to utilize mass implosion spikes and Geller bubbles to puncture the boundary and venture into the Sea of Souls for short periods, tethered in place with graviton beams. While in the Nightmare Realm, they conduct arcane experiments on the effects of even shielded exposures to flesh and metal, all the while viewing images that no mortal can view for long and stay sane. Servitors are also used for such dives, though no protective shielding is used, and often what emerges must be hurriedly destroyed. Some of the Magos have conducted their experiments for so long that reality has lost meaning. Their engramic pathways eroded smooth, they drift through the station without purpose, sometimes ending their journey at a far voidlock. Others face even more dread fates should their protective devices flicker even the slightest, their souls quickly consumed as fell denizen beings from within the warp take control of their bodies. Given the unnatural behavior most of the ancient tech priests on Diogenes 4 already exhibit, however, visitors might have grave difficulties in discerning the unnatural from the merely mechanical. Texorcists. An enigmatic sect, recruiting only a handful of initiates every few years, the Texorcists occupy a decidedly peculiar place within the hierarchy of the Calixis Mechanicus. The Texorcists possess profound knowledge of the consequences of warp influence on machinery and the machine spirits residing within them. Their particular interest lies in the realm of techno-heresy of so-called empirical devices. They are often at the forefront of investigating episodes of technologies that channel the energies of the warp. Magos Eremer founded the sect of the Texorcists in the year 824 of the 36th millennium. This Magos led his explorator fleet through a region of space that several millennia later would be called the Calix Expanse. Upon accidentally encountering a rogue trader who introduced himself as Solomon Harlock, Magos Eremer organized a joint boarding of a void traveler recently emerged from the warp, christened Fatum Posterus. The expedition compelled the Magos to deeply contemplate the role of technology and the deleterious influence of the immaterium upon it. From that very moment he dedicated himself to researching this issue while training tech adepts in methods of detecting and banishing impure machine spirits. Eremer believed that by calculating the true code of a corrupted spirit within a defiled device it could be rewritten into a properly sealed data repository, thereby banishing it forever from the now purified machine. Many Texorcists meet premature demise or mind-wiping, and their ties with the Inquisition, especially with the Ordo Malleus, render the sect extremely unpopular in the eyes of Archmagos Ralwur, the Golden, supporters and the most orthodox members of the Lathe Covenant. The Texorcists are trained in special electrogrammatical incantations and meme prayers capable of shielding the mind from corruption. As a precautionary measure, however, all Texorcists are strictly forbidden from uploading their knowledge to machine altars without the most thorough verification and neural cleansing. Calixian Malotech. The pursuit of knowledge in one form or another has always been a guiding star for each of the servants of the Omnissiah in the Calixis sector. More often than not, however, it has taken the form of seeking lost knowledge rather than deepening what already exists. The volume of data lost in the darkness of the ages is so vast that its search could occupy many generations of the tech priests from the lathe worlds. Moreover, one must consider the glacially slow bureaucratic processes, hostile factions waiting for the slightest opportunity to destroy what little you have managed to achieve, and finally, the diktats strictly outlining the proper path and methods for technological development. All are capable of enraging even the most unflappable of researchers. Not all tech priests are content with such constraints, and there are those who reject this ossified method of thinking, sometimes not out of necessity, but from a sincere belief that it is their duty, indeed, their divine duty. These radicals often choose either a more intuitive or a more practical approach to gathering and deepening knowledge, even when it goes against the cold logic of the Mechanicus doctrine. They tinker with existing technologies, spending long years studying devices deemed useless, unsafe, or too powerful. Many become too eccentric even by the standards of the cult Mechanicus. In most cases, this leads to ostracism from more conservative colleagues, and at times even to exile from their native forge world. Nevertheless, in the Calixis sector, these tech priests are not considered heretics. Instead, they are branded as Malotechs. Their actions are not deemed criminal, but at the same time, it is unacceptable for them to continue, at least where they might indeed be considered heresy. Tech priests bearing such a brand are often exiled from the lathe worlds, but most regard this nuance as a minor nuisance, nothing more. Typically, they simply relocate their research to a new place, away from the blessed trio of worlds, to begin anew, hoping one day to return to their native forge world in a blaze of triumph, having proven their detractors wrong with the magnificence of technological achievements and the brilliance of scientific wonders. Some inquisitors of the sector see in these renegades a most useful resource. The Ordo Xenos shows particular interest in them, for many of the Malotechs have engaged in xenotechnological research deep enough that ordinary tech priests would simply not dare. Inquisitors and acolytes, revered by their peers as radicals, conducting investigations somehow related to delicate technological matters, often resort to the help of the Malotechs of Calixis. Already operating outside the usual dogmas of the Inquisition, these inquisitors literally unleash the beast of science, appointing Malotechs as acolytes and agents of the throne. Moreover, they can justify the employment of these wild and unpredictable individuals in the eyes of their fellow inquisitors by claiming that they excel in combating techno-heresy, even as they arm themselves with it. There is no universal method to become a Malotech. In most cases, it occurs against one's will. Simply, one day in the life of a Magos, there comes a point when the dogmas of the Adeptus Mechanicus hinder his goal. And then his brethren perceive him as a restless individual capable of becoming a destabilizing factor for the Holy Forge. However, there are those who embrace the path of a Malotech as a means of liberation from initial shackles, a path that allows them to fully reveal their potential in the sight of the Omnissiah. But this path is one way only, for even a renegade who succeeds in his extreme research cannot hope to return to his native forge. The Adeptus Ministorum and the Adeptus Mechanicus have never enjoyed a healthy working relationship within the Calixis sector. Conflicts between the two organizations tend to be wars of words, though political battles fought in the capital worlds of the sector, rather than outright conflict between men and machines. Nevertheless, there have been several overt conflicts, such as the attack on the explorator vessel Omega Inquiry from an Adeptus Sororitas strike force on the far edges of the Halo stars. There are no official records of the encounter, but the Tricorn contains sealed data vaults hinting at an abhuman strain that the Mechanicus had uncovered far from civilized space, and the Ministorum's reactions of horror when their spies reported the discovery. Retaliatory bombardments obliterated 2 outpost convents and were about to escalate further before secretive diplomacy and unnamed offerings settled the matter. Such incidents are still rare, but with the gradual rise of a group calling itself the Cult of the Pure Form, this could begin to change. It is not known exactly who founded the Cult of the Pure Form, but their influence began in the Malthian subsector in the immediate aftermath of the Maligrisian Tech heresy. The traitorous Tech priest and his followers decimated untold worlds with their devastating weaponry, and some began to think that the existence of the Adeptus Mechanicus would lead to another inevitable war. The followers of this emerging cult feared that this coming doom would scour humankind from the galaxy, leaving only the cold, barely human flesh and machine hybrids of the Mechanicum behind. This twisted line of logic grew quickly until the first major anti-Mechanicum movement of the Calixis sector's history began to swell, with loud marches and violent demonstrations. In an unexpected move, and one that likely came about due to Cult Mechanicus' political maneuvering on Scintilla, the Sector Synod declared the leaders of the emergent cult apostate. Over the next 50 years, these leaders began to disappear, some dying in mysterious accidents and others in outright assassinations. Some thought that the Inquisition was to blame, and others whispered of the Officio Assassinorum's involvement, but very few were aware that the Lord's Dragon had carried out this early intervention, and that their clandestine methods had managed to stifle the movement before it could truly become established. Displeased that the Lord's Dragon had stepped beyond their usual bounds and were acting outside of the domains of the Lathes worlds, the Inquisition sought to move against them. To appease the Calixian conclave, the Lord's Dragon handed over what information they had on the new sect. Their hope was that the Inquisition would continue the aggressive work against the cult, but the Inquisition instead scaled back these efforts to more passive monitoring. For a time it seemed as though this early intercession had succeeded, but, like an unchecked weed, the Cult of the Pure Form rose once again. This time the cult threw out its previous methods in favor of a slower approach, and rather than attempting to whip the people of a single subsector into a frenzy, the new Pure Form leaders instead chose to let their hatred for the Mechanicus simmer on worlds across the entire sector. Unlike before, the Sector Synod made no moves to denounce the Cult of the Pure Form. Some even whispered they had begun to covertly support it. Many inquisitors began investigating the cult to see if they had been motivated by something other than a fervent love of the Emperor. But over time, some members of the Calixian conclave, especially Puritans of the Ordo Hereticus, began to see them as actually displaying agreeable philosophies as well as acting as a valuable check against the Mechanicum within the sector. This has not gone unnoticed in the Lathes. Slowly but surely, the rising cult is sparking a conflict, one that has edged closer to ignition with each passing year. The Cult of the Pure Form's members differ from other Ministorum sects within the Calixis sector in that they do not hate the Adeptus Mechanicus purely for their worship of the Omnissiah, although that certainly is part of it. They are not anti-technology either. They simply wish to wrest control of such power away from the Mechanicum so that uncorrupted humans might control it. Their true ire stems from the extensive use of cybernetics and other mechanical implants that virtually every member of the Adeptus Mechanicus possesses. To the cult, the most pure form in the universe is that of the human body, and to defile it by removing untainted flesh and grafting on artificial limbs is nothing short of heresy. Many of the members of the Cult of the Pure Form have cybernetic implants when they join, and soon undergo a ritual known as the purity of flesh to remove the implants from their bodies. This violent ritual usually leaves the participant missing limbs or eyes and can rob them of their ability to hear or even speak. But once completed, the new cult member enters the ranks of the shriven, blessed men and women who have seen the purity of mankind, have unshackled themselves from their prisons of cybernetic augmentation, and who now walk the path of the God Emperor. The bulk of the cult's ranks are made up of those lucky enough to have lived without the defilement of cybernetics and are referred to as the Untouched. Each untouched member comes to the sect for different reasons, but most are spurred on by a love of the God Emperor and an inherent mistrust of the Adeptus Mechanicus. However, the cult of the pure form does not sit by and wait for people to see its point of view, and has instituted their own group of missionaries. This third group is the most powerful within the cult, and are known as the Reformed. Acting as the public face of the cult, the Reformed are a large, sector-spanning network. They commonly preach that the God Emperor had not a single cybernetic in the days when he walked amongst mortals, and that if he was pure of flesh, then so too should his subjects be. The Reformed consist of Shriven who have reversed the process of bionic implantation, creating implants not of unholy cybernetics, but instead made out of pure flesh. These vat-grown limbs and organs are often quite crude and in many cases misshapen, but in the eyes of the cult they are pure and represent the future that it sees for mankind. There are many ways to be tempted to join the cult of the pure form. For some it is due to a feeling of betrayal, where replacement cybernetics have caused more harm than good, and the poor soul shackled by them is looking for a form of release among the ranks of the Shriven. Others, after hearing the words of the Reformed, have come to understand that the continued existence of the Adeptus Mechanicus is nothing but a disaster waiting to happen, and that it is their holy duty to do something to stop them. Others join out of a fear that if they begin to receive cybernetics, that they will lose something of their own souls, and eagerly join the ranks of the untouched to avoid this horrific fate. A select few might even be contacted directly by the cult's senior members, as their membership would greatly benefit the cult's standing and appeal across the sector. The cult also offers a strong brotherhood and a cause to motivate new meaning into previously meaningless lives. Those who achieve such purity in their flesh may find their spirit even stronger than before, and certainly stronger than those who foolishly trust their bodies to the machine. Factors of the lathes. Many members of the Adeptus Mechanicus often choose to ignore the niceties of imperial society, cleaving instead to their own esoteric, arcane practices. The priests of Mars, however, must oftentimes negotiate, wheedle and bargain with the flesh-flapping and uncouth individuals who hold themselves highly in the Imperium, that they might further the quest for knowledge. Within the lathes, the Magos devised a common solution to this problem through the use of specialization. The lathes trains their Magos Metallurgicus to refine the secrets of the true flesh, Magos Alchemies to create mystic unguents, and even Magos Biologists to unwrap the riddle of the helix. Therefore, the Magos of the lathes determined that they would utilize specialized personnel here as well. Instead of wasting the valuable cognitive cycles of its highest members, the lathes instead trains a small portion of its initiates to read the muddy and inscrutable outputs generated by outsiders, as well as the pure, precise language of the machine. The factors of the lathes are ambassadors to the wider sector, used when the lathe worlds find the most expedient path is to deal with the uninitiated on their own fleshy terms. Myth has it that a forgotten mech deacon created this class, in the wake of a cataclysmic misunderstanding that began with a scintillant priest mistaking a particularly venerable adept of Mars for a malfunctioning cogitator, and ended with several orbital bombardments. Since then, the factors of the lathes have served for centuries with distinction as ambassadors between the lathe worlds and the rest of the Calixis sector. While the factors are not loved by all members of the cult Mechanicus, they nonetheless efficiently bring about the desired results, and thus are supported and employed heavily within the lathes. Those chosen undergo decades of intense training and physical modification in the Hesh Protocol academies that they might become optimized instruments of the Omnissiah. As a result, not only do factors of the lathes lack the typical look of a tech priest, having shed their bulky augmetics in favor of subtle but no less potent equivalents, but they are also capable of regurgitating vast amounts of data that most of their brethren would deem worthless. Such information ranges from a clinically thorough knowledge of the political history of the Calixis sector to truly inscrutable subjects, such as the how to properly input and cycle nutrients when meeting with the hive nobles of various planets. To be a factor is to accept that imperfection itself can be a part of a perfect plan. The Omnissiah's purity may be found in steel and circuitry, but a factor must also be able to understand and even appreciate what he sees as the inferior workings of bone, blood and tissue. Though factors are often as heavily augmented as their brethren, they bear few visible signs of their metallic ascension. Their augmetics are instead crafted with loving precision to resemble flesh. Usually the factor conducts this work himself, as few others within the priesthood of Mars would deign or desire to make such things. Mechadendrites are kept small, subtle and hidden in clothes or able to collapse into subdermal compartments when not needed. Few factors permanently incorporate larger mechadendrites into their bodies, but some of these ambassadors find servo arms and other artificial limbs too useful for their tasks within the machine cult to forego entirely, and thus have studied the difficult art of attaching and removing their external augmetics as required. Whether a factor revels in his unique position or bemoans the travails that it entails, all ambassadors of the lathes maintain a certainty of purpose. Time and time again, the factors have been critical to the successes of the Adeptus Mechanicus of the Calixis sector, moving one Lord Governor to support a purge of a unique new form of tech heresy, or securing promises of assistance from a rogue trader whose resources can reach a becalmed explorator fleet in the Coronis expanse. Certain factors are even involved with the Inquisition, using these invaluable connections to further the causes of the Dreadlord's dragon, and some become acolytes of Inquisitors who value their subtlety, or simply find their company less grating than that of others from the Martian priesthood. Further, while their order does not specialize in such things, factors can be excellent infiltrators, as each is a fully trained tech priest in his own right, whose form betrays no overt signs of its true nature. While their apparent lack of augmentation is usually used to put others at ease, several factors have become embroiled in political and even military conflicts, catching foes unawares thanks to their appearance. As they are not immediately recognizable as priests of the machine cult, factors of the lathes often signify their office via their garb or other ornamentation. They usually wear heavily adorned mechanicum robes and sometimes even have shifting electus embedded in their skin, emblazoned with the sign of the cogwheel. Visible when they wish to state their allegiance, but vanishing if they need to act more covertly. To be a factor is to recognize that one's own imperfections can be part of a perfect plan. Hippocrations. The flesh is weaker than the pure machine, yet it possesses its own unique allure, mysteries that cannot be fully comprehended by entirely dismissing biological matter. Flesh changes, flesh begets new flesh, flesh lives and flesh dies, and it is this final state that particularly attracts the followers of one sect of the Magos biologists. They typically study biological systems, xenos so they can crush them, humans so they can improve them. Their work has led to a series of great victories over several species of xenos and significant improvements in augmentative systems, yet their great achievements often bring no glory. On lathe worlds they are avoided, associated with some failed experiments and their consequences. The most conservative tech priests consider their activities to be biological heresy. All of this gradually pushed the biologists to the remote regions of Calixis, where they could quietly conduct their own research. One such region is the Adrantis Nebula, the Morwin system. In orbit of its sixth planet is a void station, where research is conducted on the transience of flesh, where tech priests attempt to unlock the mysteries of death itself. The planet is devoid of life, making it ideal for their experiments. It is the realm of the Hippocrasian sect. To outsiders, a Magos biologist outpost dedicated to corporeal investigations for the benefit of the entire sector. It hides many secrets, for the most nightmarish techno-heresies flourish deep within, where a forbidden clique conducts unholy experiments that far exceed the station's mandate. Although documents from the Angevin Crusade are at best highly fragmented, they suggest that the Morwin system was once full of life and flourishing. Some evidence indicates that the local inhabitants maintained active contacts with a certain Xenos civilization. which could have been the reason for its bombardment in the early stages of the Crusade. The Magos biologists arrived in the system aboard a Hippocrasian pattern orbital, an expansive ring of interlinked modular sections used as void laboratory complexes. Their oath of data to the High Fabricator required them to conduct research into the processes of flesh decay, as well as methods to prevent or delay biological failures. Soon, tech priests from across the sector began arriving at the station, drawn by the renown of the groundbreaking discoveries made on the slabs of its mortuaries. The influx of fresh blood led to a wave of new alchemical elixirs, tissue fusion devices, organ regenerators and other technologies extremely useful in conducting biological research. Now known as the Hippocrasian sect, they continue to seek out the weaknesses of frail flesh. Experiments on the inhabitants of the cells and slave pens were conducted by the hundreds. Very few of the Hippocrasians were interested in the origins of the subjects. Over several centuries, the scope of research extended beyond the station, and soon new stations and ships began to appear in the adjacent high orbits around it. Auxiliary complexes, loading docks for large cargo, plasma banks, and much more. All of these soon filled the space around the first station. Such a gathering proved a very convenient staging point for explorators heading into the nebula. Tech priests, always suspicious of the sect, perceived the incident as yet another example that the study of flesh inevitably leads to disarray, and named this undisciplined flotilla the Hippocrasian agglomeration. The works of the Hippocrasian sect have always balanced on the brink between tech heresy and the permissible standards of Magos biologists. Many of its adherents dedicated themselves to the study of sculptural genetics and the grafting of artificially grown tissues. Some dare to conduct deeper research in this direction, creating golems of flesh and blood and experimenting on them with various protocols of decay and regeneration. Some even attempt to rework the nervous system, as they are convinced that flesh can be made to reject necrotic decay. The bodies of the subjects, awkward, hideous progeny fueled by a special experimental protoplasm, are capable of rejecting death itself, and the caste necrosis considers this an important step towards longevity and the perfection of flesh. Conversely, the ethereals are more interested in the transition from life to death and the study of the nature of this process. At the moment life leaves the body, these tech priests fix themselves to countless sensors and divining arrays, hoping to see what even many among them regard as intangible. Their true goal is the soul. Their highest aspiration is to detect and even capture that elusive substance that departs the body at the moment of death. What goals they strive to achieve, no one knows, but some of the Hippocrasians gradually come to the idea of using various heretical xeno-devices, forgetting the danger of the curse they expose their own soul to. Numerous classified groups conduct research in other areas as well. For instance, the preservationists explore the possibility of maintaining life at the edge of death by any available means, regardless of the horrific consequences such states might have for the body and soul. As long as death stands at the threshold, they consider the experiment a success. The adepts of the Ice League apply cryogenics to prevent biological failures, subjecting the body to low temperatures, especially those at which flesh becomes hard and brittle, in order to spur the organism's life processes. Even their few successes in this field are considered at best doubtful by many. The machinists generally deny the existence of death, employing technological aids to enable corpses to move, as well as foul concoctions intended to preserve their flesh. Bodies usually refuse to accept such procedures, which does not deter the group from conducting further experiments. These are just some representatives of a very extensive list of dangerous organizations of agglomerations who at one time split off from the first group of researchers. Although there are individual technocults, like the Carnicula, they are all united by one thing: an endless interest in death, and its silent, cold presence is felt behind every one of their experiments. However, special attention should be given to caste necrosis, which stands as a hidden blight among the Hippocrasians, for their experiments delve into domains long and firmly deemed heretical. Those aware of this cult's existence consider it the creation of Magos Vathek himself. or perhaps those inspired by his nightmarish experiments in the reanimation of dead tissue. Some even believe the caste to be founded by an arch-mutate named Archimedes Noxt, who allegedly now secretly funds it and supplies information to better manage his own unstable flesh. The clique of tech priests who founded this caste are acutely aware that exposure of their activities promises their reduction into servitor components. Yet they believe that the knowledge gleaned from their experiments justifies any risk. Necrosis conceals its labours within fortified mortuaries struck from Hippocrasian's records or at its secluded auxiliary stations. In these secret refuges, flesh is cultivated, processed, destroyed and reconstituted, all to discover and transcend the limits of its capabilities. Initially, they grew flesh golems merely to study their conditions in different controlled environments, but soon the golems themselves became their primary research focus. The creation of new flesh for these constructs soon led them to experiment with forbidden extracts and heretical techniques, opening new avenues for scientific thought. As their creations became more resilient, the tech priests began to transplant organs and tissues from the most successful golems onto themselves, sometimes replacing their own augments with these horrific grafts. Some members of the caste engaged in pursuits so dark that they inevitably attracted the attention of ruinous powers, notably Grandfather Nurgle. Thus ends our tale of the secret societies of the Calixis tech priests. Through their activities, they toe the line between allegiance to the Imperium and the descent into the darkness of heresy. Some of them hide within the Lathe world system, finding it easiest to conceal themselves right under the High Fabricator's nose. Others have ventured beyond the system, lurking in the void of Calixis's volatile zones to cloak their techno-heresy from prying eyes. Regardless, it is no accident they hide in Calixis, as this region remains a vulnerable spot within the Imperium. And perhaps it is from here that a new threat may arise unless the Inquisition or the Lord's Dragon promptly stifle its growth at the earliest stage.